Hey everyone, Colin from Gaming Through the Ages here. I'm a pretty big JRPG fan, and naturally, you would expect me then to be a fan of both the original Final Fantasy VII and the remake. And I am. I think they're both fantastic games, and I love how Final Fantasy VII is trying to build off of the foundation that Final Fantasy VII provided, while then going off on its own way. I'm cautiously optimistic for the next entry in the series. But something that I hadn't gotten the chance to get to yet until now is the Yuffie DLC. I figured this would be a great chance for me to really see which direction that they're going to go in, storytelling wise. Does it live up to my hype, or is it going to leave me a little bit disappointed? Let's get into it. As I've mentioned, this DLC stars Yuffie, a young ninja from the nation of Wutai. In the remake, the developers go out of their way to stress the tensions between the city of Midgar, governed by Shinra, and the city of Wutai. So being put in the shoes of a Wutai national was really interesting. You get to see Midgar from her perspective, and it goes a long way into making the world of Final Fantasy VII a more interesting place. Combat and basic gameplay is basically identical to combat in Final Fantasy VII Remake with a few twists. I found Yuffie to be a bit odd to control at first, since she's both a melee attacker, a ranged attacker, and a magic user all in one. She definitely requires a bit more skill to pull off than, say, Cloud's combat style. But once you get the hang of it, you can really feel her versatility. She can handle any situation. The main other difference is the presence of Yuffie's only party member, Sonan. Sonan is also a ninja from Wutai, who had trained under Yuffie's father. You can't control him, but you can do synchronized attacks that massively increase your damage done to enemies. When Yuffie dies, Sonan sacrifices himself to bring Yuffie back. Personally, I would have preferred to be able to play as both, but Sonan sacrificing himself speaks to his character, which I'll discuss more later on. Most of the things I want to say about this DLC relates to the story, for which I'm going to put up a spoiler tag. But before that, I do want to talk about a new feature, Fort Condor. In the original, Fort Condor was an RTS minigame that you had to do once, but other than that was an optional side quest you would do for rewards. In this DLC, Fort Condor is converted into a board game with trading card game elements, and I think it's fantastic. Each player has their own board, which determines the speed at which they can summon units and spells they can cast. They each also have a custom set of units, which you can buy in shops, earn by winning Fort Condor battles, and finding them while playing the game. Each side of the board has 2 outposts and 1 headquarters, each protected by a big condor. And your goal is to deploy your units to stop your opponent from destroying your headquarters while trying to destroy your opponent's headquarters instead. On the whole, this game is really fun. The units have a rock, paper, scissors type matchup system, like the Pokemon Elemental types, or better yet, Fire Emblem's weapon triangle. This makes it so that you can't just plop down strong units and win. You have to react to what your opponent has done. It really requires strategic thinking. But this game has one weakness that inhibits it from greatness, I think. The time limit. I get that it prevents games from going on for too long, but I think it's way too short. It gets in the way of full matches being played out. The majority of my victories, the vast majority, I didn't even get to destroy the enemy headquarters. I had destroyed one of the outposts maybe, and then the time ran out. But since I was closer to victory than the opponent, I suppose, I won automatically. In fact, this is how I beat the Grand Master, the goal of the Fort Condor side quest. In that case, I was happy about it because the guy was hard as hell. But for the rest of the matches, I did think this time limit was a hindrance. Okay, now I want to turn to the story. If you want to avoid spoilers, either stop now or jump to here in the time code. Yuffie's goal is to infiltrate Shinra headquarters and steal the ultimate materia. Yuffie came to Midgar to cooperate with Avalanche. Not Tifa's and Barrett's group, precisely, since they're a splinter cell, but a bigger Avalanche cell that's still in the good graces with the main organization. It's here that Yuffie meets Sonon, of whom I've spoken of briefly. The two of them go off to get their fake IDs, and then they manage to infiltrate Shinra headquarters. While at Shinra HQ, Yuffie and Sonon learn that Shinra intends to drop the plate on the slums, which Yuffie does witness in person. They also learn that there is no real ultimate materia, or that at least it's not complete. Their main enemy, at least so it appears at first, is Scarlet, one of the higher-ups in Shinra. It turns out that she was the one who killed Sonon's sister, so he has a special reason to go after her. By the way, her character and her character design is fantastic, and I hope we get to see more of her in the next game. In the background, though, there are two characters whose presence are quite literally unexplained: Vice and Nero. Vice only appears in one or two cutscenes and doesn't face the party, while Nero serves as the final boss of the DLC. Apparently, you're the only one who has ever hurt him, and so he goes through that stale anime trope of needing to feel more pain and death to feel alive. You beat his boss fight, and everything looks good. Well, then he comes back and he's about to kill Yuffie when Sonon takes the blow instead. The last we see of Sonon, he's taken away, either for burial or, far more likely, to be used as a boss fight in the next game. Before I get on to the negatives, of which you might hear in the tone of my voice, let me start with the positives. I love the world building when it comes to Wutai and Avalanche. While there's still a lot more that we need to know, I am a sucker for multifaceted geopolitical conflict. The discussions that Yuffie and Sonon have about why Avalanche would be willing to ally with Wutai when there still appears to be tensions rooted in an earlier conflict were pure bliss for a political junkie like me. I could listen to that conversation for 30 minutes at a time. Catching sight of the Splinter Cell's concerns over Cloud's disappearance after blowing up the Section 5 reactor was great too, as it further fleshed out their existence as a group instead of being simply a vehicle for Cloud to enter the story. When it comes to the world building, I really liked this DLC. The negative, like so many times in Square Enix games, comes at the end. I cannot stand how they introduce Vice and Nero with literally no explanation at all. You have no idea who these guys are. I get that these guys come from Dirge of Cerberus, which I've only found out later, but I've never played Dirge of Cerberus, and I don't think that such an important part of a narrative, literally the final boss, should be incomprehensible to those of us who didn't play a PS2 game. Don't get me wrong, I will play that game eventually, but for now, it makes for a disappointing attempt of ratcheting up the mystery. Ooh, who's that guy? I don't care, I already don't like him. And I'm doubly mad about the death of Sonon. I really like Sonon as a character, since he sort of served as the stand-in for veteran JRPG players, patiently tolerating Yuffie's antics while pushing her in the right direction. More than that, knowing that Square Enix will be building out from the traditional narrative of the original Final Fantasy VII in the next game, I thought that he would be a great addition to the main party as another representative of Wutai. We could see two different sides of Wutai, Yuffie and Sonon. Instead, some boss whom I've already beaten comes up and kills him. And this offends on two fronts. First of all, I hate it when I beat a boss and the game decides that I didn't. If I wasn't supposed to win against the boss, make it a battle that I'm supposed to lose. Making me go through all the rigmarole of beating an enemy, only for that to not matter in the narrative whatsoever, is disrespectful to the player and causes ludonarrative dissonance. Second, I cannot think of a good reason to kill off Sonon, narrative-wise. Why? To give Yuffie reason for revenge against Shinra? She already has that. To give Yuffie a reason to join the Splinter Cell? She's already said herself that she might prefer the Splinter Cell's more extremist methods on her own. Sonams Death seems like a cheap way to give emotional gravitas to an ending that easily could have ended with both of them viewing the dropping of the plate on the slums. It would have had the same impact. When a game's narrative makes me angry at the narrative rather than the character performing the action, it has failed. And that's what's so disappointing about this DLC. Well, guys, that's the review. On the whole, I'm kind of mixed on this one. On the one hand, the gameplay is the same fantastic Final Fantasy VII Remake gameplay that we've all grown to love and expect. I really had a fun time playing through it. I love the world-building aspects that this DLC provides. Fort Condor is a great addition that I hope they bring back in the next game. But in terms of its narrative direction, and my faith that the Square Enix team will really be able to pull off kind of going in its own direction in the next game, I'm still going to buy the next one, but I am not as confident as I had been. I'm going to be honest with you. Hopefully, I'm wrong. I do hope that I'm wrong. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please go ahead, leave a like, leave a comment, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell, and we will see you next week for more Gaming Through the Ages content. Have a great night, everyone.